Our first fireside chat of the day will be Securing the Bio-AI Future, a U.S. national security imperative. Please welcome Representative Stephanie Bice, Commissioner on the NSCEB, and Dr. Michelle Rozo, Vice Chair of the NSCEB, for a discussion moderated by Caitlin Frazer.
All right, me again. Thank you, Congresswoman Bice. Thank you, Dr. Rozo, for kicking off our day today. And I really want to use this conversation to set the stage for why we're all here today. And so let me start with this. Congresswoman, you didn't have to serve on this commission. You raised your hand to serve on this commission. For those who don't know Congresswoman Bice, she's been an extraordinary leader in the House of Representatives on national security issues, and in particular, a strong interest on supply chain issues and how that intersects with our economic strength and national security. So, Congresswoman, how did that interest in the relationship between supply chain security, competition with China, and economic strength here at home translate into your decision to serve on this commission?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you all this morning. It's an exciting week for the commission, having launched the report and being able to share it with all of you here. For me, it started back my first term. I was elected to Congress in 2020, and I was put on the House Armed Services Committee. And Chairman Rogers at that time said, we need to be looking at supply chain from a national security standpoint. So he asked me to be on a task force. It was a very short 3-month task force to look at where are the vulnerabilities that we have as a nation as it relates to national security. And that particular task force came up with 5 recommendations. And it was things that we would probably assume, pharmaceutical, rare earth minerals, semiconductors, microchips. But one thing that was interesting was we also talked about workforce. And one of the commissioners here with us really focused in on that. So you fast forward and the commission is stood up through the NDAA, and Chairman Rogers saw my interest in sort of the national security space and how we were working on reshoring, onshoring, focusing on manufacturing, and he said, why don't you serve on this commission? I'd like to appoint you to it. So it was a real honor and a privilege for me to be a part of it. I do not have a science background. I'm a marketing executive by trade, so this was a very unusual sort of realm for me to be in, but it was very exciting. And I think that the report really shows our commitment to trying to figure out how do we make sure that we don't lose ground, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it.
Thank you. And I don't have a technical background either, and one of the things that's been really remarkable about the composition of this commission and the opportunity to watch you lead alongside members of the commission who do have that strong technical depth is that we've all learned from each other. Mm-hmm. And there's been a really interesting sort of cross-pollination of expertise as those who didn't necessarily have a deep background in biotechnology learned about it, and those who did learned perhaps about how to land these ideas with you and your colleagues. Exactly. So Dr. Rozo, your leadership as vice chair of the commission was perhaps a little bit more inevitable given your decade of work at the intersection of biotechnology and national security. But I've heard you say before that despite all of that depth, you have learned a lot out of this experience too. So could you share a little bit about not just what motivated you to want to have this opportunity to lead this group, but also some of the observations and reflections that have stood out to you over the course of the last 2 years.
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for your leadership throughout the last 2 years, and to the staff. It's been amazing working alongside you. And to Stephanie, Representative Bice, an honor to be with you today and to serve alongside you for the last 2 years at the commission. So as Caitlin said, I am a technologist by training. I'm a molecular biologist. I studied muscular dystrophies in graduate school and then infectious diseases as a postdoc. And I was able to work in West Africa following the 2015 Ebola outbreak, looking at biotechnologies and how we could make diagnostics for low resource settings like where our military members are deployed. And so I saw firsthand how important biotechnology was for that mission, but how difficult it can be to commercialize these technologies where there may be a real national security need, but also not a broad global commercial market. I wanted to work on these issues more, and so I came to Washington first through a AAAS fellowship, which brings scientists into policy positions, and was fortunate to spend a year on the Hill learning just how laws are made. And then I went to the Department of Defense, where I ran biotech strategy. And people ask, what was the transition like from bench to policy? But for me, it was the transition from biotech as a domain for health to biotech for everything else. And then from there, I went to National Security Council, where I worked on these issues as well. And again, that sort of perspective continued to grow and continues to grow to this day, just how much biotechnology can touch every aspect of our lives, of course, from health, but also to agriculture and industry and energy and defense and national security. Today, I work at InQtel. At IQT, we make strategic investments in global startups on behalf of the National Security Mission. And again, through that role and through work on the commission, you continue to appreciate just how much potential there is for biotechnology across the whole country. What we see coming out of labs and startups is just amazing. But that is just about to grow, and really, the boom for biotech is coming. We're nearing this inflection point where advances in artificial intelligence and AI and emerging biotechnology are supercharging and converging together. And that's really why we were created as a commission, by design in advance of that inflection point, so that policymakers in Washington and critically Congress people had what they needed, the tools they needed to ensure that America could meet that moment.
One of the things that the Commission observes in the report is that the Chinese government has been making biotechnology a strategic priority for something like 2 decades now. Congresswoman, I wonder if you could reflect a little bit about some of the recommendations that we make that are designed to address strategic vulnerabilities that may have emerged here in the United States, whether that's a supply chain vulnerability or another. I'll leave the answer to you. But one of the things that we've really learned is that that there has been strategy behind the Chinese government's approach, and really an opportunity to reset that. You were part of a group of commissioners yesterday who introduced the National Biotechnology Initiative Act, one of the major first pieces of legislation coming out of the commission. And so let me ask you, how are you thinking about either that recommendation or other recommendations in the commission's report that are responsive to this dynamic with China?
I think there's a couple of things that we really needed to focus on, and that is making sure that we're looking at the entire landscape. Oftentimes in government, we're sort of picking different pieces that we want to try to address. And so it was really incumbent upon us as a commission to figure out what are all of the pieces that need to be addressed, whether it is reshoring manufacturing or standing up biomanufacturing across the country, whether it is investing in innovation specifically for biotech. You see all of these different programs across, especially DoD, that are really doing some innovative work, but are they doing the right work? And that's one of the things that I sort of thought about as we were looking at these policy areas. But looking at it from a whole of government, what do we need to be doing writ large to be able to put us in a position to compete and or be the leader? Because as Caitlin mentioned earlier, we are falling behind in a lot of ways. And it's mainly because we didn't have a strategy. We didn't have a whole of government strategy. We didn't have a focus. And I think it was really not on people's radar. And so as a policymaker now, a lawmaker, one of my objectives is to educate my colleagues about why this is so important, why we need to be investing in biotech, why we need to be investing in manufacturing, why we need to be investing in workforce development. We talk a lot about STEM across the country, especially in my home state of Oklahoma. But what does that really mean? Where is the job workforce going, and how do we make sure that we're filling the needs that we have? And this is a unique space, but there's so much potential and opportunity, and I'm really excited for us to continue to push forward in ensuring that we are doing this with a really, I think, long-term perspective, because that's what our adversaries are doing. It's incumbent upon us to do the same.
Absolutely. Dr. Rozo, you said earlier that one of the things that was eye-opening for you, in not just in the commission process, but earlier in your career, was this breadth of applications across our economy. I've also heard you talk about the idea that biotechnology is going to create jobs all over our country. I wonder if you could say a little bit about what you see as that potential. And conversely, what do we stand to lose?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, because it's one of my favorite things about biotechnology. And I think an interesting thing to talk to people who aren't as conversant in what biotechnology and critically biomanufacturing is and can be. And it's one of the inherent strengths in America, and why we stand to lead on this technology is, one, our innovation ecosystem, but two, it's the agriculture that's grown across this country in the heartland of America that can serve as that input into biomanufacturing, so we can remake global supply chains here in America. This is not legacy manufacturing, this is new manufacturing, bringing supply chains back home and creating jobs all across America. And we have, throughout our recommendations, policies that will promote that development in every district and locality, things like grand challenges around flexible feedstocks. So why today it may be corn grown in the Midwest that serves as the starting point to make chemicals for our supply chain. Tomorrow it could be mushrooms in Pennsylvania or apples in New York and Washington. You really just need a source of carbon. You need the agriculture. And so this is really exciting to be the ability to take surplus agriculture grown all across America and turn that into the starting material for new products for our economy, new jobs everywhere across this country.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as we enter this next phase of the Commission's work, which is really when we take these ideas into the world, when we take these ideas to your colleagues in particular, you know, there's a lot of different ways that that biotechnology can kind of meet people where they are, depending on what they're interested in, which sector, you know, is an economic driver in their community. Are they interested in technology competition or national security or economic security? So, Congresswoman, how can people in this room and in the wider community of folks who are excited about an American-led future of biotechnology be most effective in helping with this next push, particularly in engaging with your colleagues?
Well, I think it's using your voice, reaching out to your legislators, reaching out to those within your communities to raise the issue, because it's such an important one, but I think it's flown under the radar for quite some time. And so, as I mentioned, for me, it's going to be an education piece for my colleagues in Congress. I've actually already scheduled a meeting, a classified briefing with a bipartisan group of members in the House to tell them what we have learned over the last 2 years, what scares us in this realm, and then what we should be doing about it. And that's going to move us forward, but it's also, I think, important that you all are part of the conversation, that you recognize that you have to use your voice, your connections, your expertise to share what you see, what you're working on. You know, one of the things that's really fun for me is I get to see a lot of really cool stuff. I mentioned my time on the Armed Services Committee. I'm now on Appropriations, but during my time on HASC, I went out to DIU and spent a day seeing all of the incredible things that they were working on, and things like, you know, 3D printing pharmaceuticals. That could be really helpful to us, right? So, you know, teaching those of us that are not in this space the importance of what you're doing and why. I think the why is really critical. That's going to help put this, shine a light on what we're doing and help us, sort of the narrative, help us help you, if you will, to be more effective as we're looking to put forward policy and legislative ideas for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Rozo, I'll ask you to close us out with a comment on the concept of bioliteracy. This is something that we write about in the report. You know, I think as a nation we have talked about the need for computer literacy, right? That you don't necessarily need to know how to code in order to use a computer in your daily life, to be a good consumer of that technology. how should we be thinking about an analog for biotechnology? And I want to relate this to the Congresswoman's comments, which is, this is a room full of, I think, highly bioliterate people, and some.
But they may have to dumb it down a little bit for some of us that are not scientists.
This is what I wanted to talk about, is like how can we cultivate a culture, not just here in DC, but nationally and globally, of bioliteracy, and why is that important?
Thank you. So this is the other part of our next phase of work, in addition to getting legislation passed through Congress, is, as the Congresswoman was saying, continue to educate both here in Washington, but also across the country, what biotechnology can do. And so we are launching what we refer to as a book tour, to be able to go to states and localities and share just all the exciting things that are happening in biotechnology, to share that and amplify that through our platform, our website, our communications. And so look to all of you for great ideas of things that we can be highlighting, and showing to people what this really means, how it can transform lives all across the country.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.